I know many people talk about creativity as like, it's coming through you, right? It's not something that I'm making up. It's something that I'm catching. I'm asking a question in my awareness, and then the answer comes and I write it down.
Welcome everyone to the Creator Jump Off podcast. I am your host, Natalie Mertz, and today I have my very good friend, a really incredible and very multi-talented creative, which I think will be my first question is like how we want your bio to unfold. But today with me is Leigh Marino. So welcome, Leigh.
Thank you, Natalie. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm always happy to talk to you. And okay, so let's figure out your bio. So you're a writer. You've written so far 2 children's books.
Yes.
Okay. There's so much. All right. What you do?
Right now I work in digital media. So I do website design, graphic design, and some social media posting. My background's in film and TV. Film is my first love and really where I see myself going. The children books stuff has just been like a happy accident, something that I have enjoyed doing. It wasn't something I ever set out to do. Film is my ultimate goal. So the first children's book I have, I self-published. The second one that's coming out next year is with a publisher. And when I had the idea for that one, I first saw it as a short animated film, but when I sat down to write the screenplay, it came out as this like rhyming children's book. So I figured, okay, it's a children's book first, then I can take that like physical thing and say, here's the book. Okay, here's the adapted screenplay, find a producer and say, help me make this movie.
I love it. So we've been friends for a long time now. Like, I think 11 years is when I met you. I met you in 2012. And we've like throughout our friendships, it's a lot of it has centered around like life, and like how we're doing and how we're navigating it, but also creative projects. And I feel like film has certainly always been a through line with you and like all the different things that you do or used to do and whatnot. Cause like, since I've known you, you've have been on this like really amazing journey of like trying a lot of different things and a lot of different like modalities and different mediums and stuff. But I feel like it always comes back to film. You started out like your career, like you said, in film. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like how, like your film origin story?
Well, I can tell you that my love for it really started when I was probably about 14, when I found myself in this place where I remember writing in my journal, I've lost it, in quotes. I didn't know what it was, but it was something that I just felt like I had lost, like my spark or my connection or just like the magic of life, my enjoyment. I didn't really know. I just remember writing it. And I had this realization that if I wanted to be able to feel good, I had to also allow myself to feel bad. I just kind of felt this numbness, but I didn't also feel like I could just be like, okay, cry, like just feel bad, or feel good. So I turned to movies and television to make me feel and be able to cry and feel strongly in a safe way. So that was my first connection with emotions and just a realization of it all being all, not just one. You can't just feel good all the time. You have to feel all of the things. So that's, I think, where it started for me. And then I took a filmmaking class in high school, which I really loved. And I always was an artist. I always did drawing with pencils and charcoal. Mostly I did a lot of really realistic drawings. Then I decided I wanted to do film for my career. I went to NYU. I studied it as an undergrad. I really had no idea what aspect of film I wanted to do. I think deep down inside, I always wanted to write and direct. But for years and years and years, I had this feeling that was not conscious, but it was just a belief that was like, oh, everyone wants that. So that's why you think you want that. So, but no, find what you really want or what you're really good at or what other people aren't doing. So there's less competition or something. So I went to film school. Back then we did not have Avids or like digital editing. So we were editing on a Steenbeck, which is physically cutting the film, splicing it together with tape and like running it through this machine, which is like really old school. And I remember like making my first edit, a wide shot into a close shot or a close into a wide. And it was like on this action and it like was smooth. And I was like, oh my God, it's like magic. Like that was so cool. I like that moment. I was like, that's what I want to do. I'll be an editor. So I graduated from school and I looked for jobs in post-production and I ended up working in that and ultimately ended up in a small edit house and they edited trailers. No, actually, sorry, that was my internship. They were just a small post house and they edited mostly commercials. And the person that I worked for was a really, really difficult person. And it was not a pleasant experience. It was extremely stressful. I remember like feeling like the world was going to end because of a Twix commercial. And I was just like, what is this? What am I doing? This is not worth it. Like that stress. Like this is not what I thought it was going to be. It's not what I want to do. And I decided I wanted to leave the industry. I wanted to leave New York. And try something else for a while. I thought I was going to be like a bike messenger or something, or a bike tour guide, because all the bike messengers would come and, we would send tapes to our clients and stuff. And I thought they were all so cool. I made friends with them.
Bike messengers are cool. They have like their own universe and like they're very utilitarian and they wear like a really heavy chain around their waist. They are cool.
They were really, really cool. So I applied to be a bike tour guide in Europe. That didn't happen. I just was like, I want out of this. It's not, I don't know. I want something else. And I think also at the time I was young, like I knew how to get good grades. But I didn't really have anything to say. Didn't have confidence in myself as an artist, as a creator. And I didn't really have much hardship that I had gone through to be able to come out the other side of it and have some wisdom or something to share with the world, in a way to help people. So I just went off and lived my life and did other things for a while. I got married. I left New York May of 2001. So it was right before 9/11. And I worked as a photographer. I worked at a newspaper. I did just random things, worked at a bed and breakfast, and always came back to film as, something that I was in love with and something I knew I always wanted to do it, but I just didn't know how. And I was doing photography at the time and realized like I really miss film and I want to get back into it. So I decided to go back to school, which took me to LA. And I thought, well, let me learn cinematography because I really like photography. So maybe that's the thing I'm going to do in film. So I went to the LA Film School for a year. At that point, I had already been working. I was probably like 27 or something. So I had been in the real world. I knew what it was like to have a job and to pay rent and, all that stuff. So since that was only a 1-year program, by the time I got out of that, I was already working and getting paid because at that point, like I knew what it was like to network and be out in the world. And like, I got as much as I could out of that school. I just did a bunch of stuff for free, made contacts, developed relationships, and I learned that if you do a good job, you show up on time, you're reliable and you're polite, you're better than like 85% of everybody else out there, which was like mind boggling to me. So I was working and getting paid after just a year. And so I started working on sets and film, the camera department. I think I really don't feel at home anymore, anywhere more than on set.
Can we go back to what you were just saying about being reliable? I think that's really important. And I want to underline that. And that has been my experience too. I remember my senior year in college, my portfolio teacher says, I hired two kinds of designers. I went to school for graphic design. She's like, the first is like, maybe like they're like a really type A designer and like they're like amazing at what they do. They have incredible technical skill. Like they're just like a real top designer, but maybe, they're not super fun or they're not super social or whatever, like they're not really contributing so much to the culture, but like their design chops are amazing. And the second person that I hire is someone, maybe their design chops are not so great, but they're fun to be around. They're reliable. Like they enhance the culture there. They show up. And I remember her saying that. And it was like, I think I can be the second one. Cause I don't think, you know what I mean? Like I'm not like a killer with design. I mean, I'm a good designer, but there was something about that stuck. And I find that that's really true. Like it's, half the battle is like getting someone's name right when you're interviewing with them or like when you're like sending out your resume, just being able to show up, right? Because I think like skills are teachable, right? Like you can learn software and you can learn how to do a job, but you can't teach someone attitude. You can't teach someone reliability. You can't teach someone how to show up on time. And so that is like extremely valuable, and as someone like, that I hire people, I've hired people at companies and like I've hired people in my own business and stuff. I will forgive so much shit if you're kind, and you're thoughtful and you like go the extra mile or like you're reliable, like you respond to my Slack messages and stuff. And I feel like too, like, I'd love for you to like speak more about this, like the little that I know about like Hollywood and like the TV and movie industry too is like getting in and letting people get to know you and think like who would be great for this and like knowing, oh, Leigh is great because Leigh is reliable or whatever. Like I've worked with her before and she was pleasant to work with, right? Like, isn't that more than half the battle really?
Yes. Yep. It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just wanted
a crew of people. There were a few DPs that I would work for, the directors of photography. And, a lot of times they'd be hired for a job and then people would ask them, oh, do you know anybody for the camera crew? Or they would say like, oh, I have this person I like working with or that person. And, they would text you and see if you're available. And the work always came. It just always came.
Yeah. So also you were saying like you feel really comfortable. You really love being on set, like and being around lots of other people and whatnot. What is it about that?
It feels like this like family, like a camaraderie where we're all in this together. It's like, it's the craft that I love. And I know that probably most of the other people there do too. You all kind of just get it. You have your own lingo, everybody has their own departments. And even if the film you're working on is really shitty, it still can be a really fun experience. And it's creative. You're telling a story. There are actors and directors and sound people and costume people and set designers. And, I don't know, it's just like, it's really cool. I feel like everybody has their own role and you all work together in this like family system that's like in the best worlds, very organized and smooth.
Can you talk more about like when you graduated from film school, like what was your first in? Like, did you have people like teachers or other students or whatever that like made connections for you to help you get your first job? Like, how did you kind of get your in?
Yeah, when I was in school, so that was just a 1-year program. And when I was in that school, I worked on projects within the school. And then there were teachers who would be doing this or that, or other students. And you would just kind of like make relationships that way. And someone would randomly be doing some job and they would, know you from this student film or this project. And then you just kind of started working on that. I think I did a bunch of things for free at first. Like I was a PA on, one of the teachers was like, I need some PAs on this feature film. And so you just go and do what they need you to do and stand out. If you do a fine job, you're like, you have common sense, you're there to help and you're reliable, like you're going to stand out. And so, yeah, that's how you do it. I just started doing it that way. So by the end of that year, I had made those relationships and people had graduated before me or at the same time as me. And, we were all kind of like getting out there and calling each other and working that way.
Nice. So you did that for a while, like you worked on sets?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I was like, not quite fulfilled either in that. And I had the chance to join the union, the camera department union, and I was on a feature film that flipped. Do you know what that means?
No.
Okay, so there's union projects and then non-union projects. And in order to be able to get in the union, you have to have a certain number of union hours, but you can't work a union show unless you're in the union. So it's like weird. But one of the ways that you can
catch 22
hours is if you're working a non-union project and then you unionize it. So a member from the union will come and it's kind of like, everyone's whispering and, we're going to go on strike and it's this plan. And then you show up the next day and everybody's on strike. And they're like, okay, we're not working until you sign a contract with the union. And it's weird because you feel bad, but at the same time, like it's this camaraderie and everybody's doing it. And like, it's just like, I don't know, it's just what you do because you want to be in the union. And so I did that on a feature and it flipped, which means it went union. And so then I had a certain number of hours. And also then because I stood up for that and was part of it, then I was able to send an email or make a phone call to somebody in the union and be like, oh, I was on this show that flipped and I was part of the strike. I supported the union. So, hey, here's the number of hours I worked. Can I get in? And they were like, yes, sure. You just have to pay these dues or whatever. And so I was on the cusp of doing that. But I was also like, do I want to do that? Do I want to continue this job? I don't really know. It was this kind of point where, I just wasn't sure what road to go down. And I got pregnant. So that was the answer for me there. I was like, okay, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to carry heavy equipment. And I'm going to get a desk job for a little while until I have my child, and then I'm going to stay home. So that was what happened there. So I left that all behind for a while, a bunch of years. When my daughter was born, then I did photography. I started getting into baby photography, maternity photography, family photography, because that was my life at that time. And then those were all the kinds of people that I knew. So I started my own side job doing that. And it's what I've done now for a while. But then it morphed. And I no longer wanted to do those kinds of things like families and maternity and babies. And I made it more commercial. And it's moved more into what I do now, which is lifestyle stuff. I don't really like to do product photography, but I will if I need to. Just generally whatever I need for websites and stuff, or someone hires me to do headshots or something like that. It's a part of my business. It's not all of it.
Yeah. Talk to me more about how motherhood kind of pivoted, the course of your life, obviously, but also the direction of your career. And the thing that I love about creatives and stuff and is that we can pivot pretty easily, right? I think that you have this innate curiosity and enthusiasm to jump into new things and to learn and stuff. And so I love that, okay, you're I don't want to be lifting, schlepping stuff on a set, while I'm pregnant. And, I want to have a healthy, safe pregnancy and stuff. And so you pivoted into that. And also just your, how did life as a mom, kind of change your trajectory, as an artist. And something else too, we haven't really touched on, but, if you're comfortable talking about is you're a very spiritual person. When you and I talk one-on-one, we talk a lot about spirituality and kind of what is, what kind of meaning are we injecting into our lives and stuff. I think a lot about that in terms of my creative career. I think you do as well. I'm sorry. I know I just asked you 9,000 questions, but yeah, I mean, just how did motherhood, how did things kind of change your perspective or even now?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I'm a totally different person as a mother than I was before I was a mother. I feel like there are so many things that, like I was saying earlier, when I was younger, I hadn't really been through a lot of life, so I didn't have much to say. I always had this like creative desire to make and create, but I didn't really know what, and I didn't know how to say what and what to say and how to share it. Now I feel that I've been through so much of life. I have a lot to say, and I have a lot of understanding and wisdom to share. And I would say that I really, really, really wish that I could give all that to my child. However, she's 15 and she wants nothing to do with whatever I say. She wants the opposite. So, because of that, I think now I'm turning to the rest of the world. Like, well, she doesn't want to hear what I have to say right now, but maybe other people do. I know that one day she'll come around and she'll realize, but she's, needs to be her own person and do her own things. And some of it she hears. I try to plant some seeds in her mind, and in certain situations. And I try to just live my life by example so that she can see that I do what I say. And I'm not just like, you do this, and then I do something else. Or I do things that I don't even say, and she just sees it and unconsciously, learns that. So, yeah, I don't want to say it derailed me in any way. I think that it just changed my trajectory and added a lot to my experience of life. And now that she's older, I feel like, all right, I'm ready to get back on track with those dreams and desires that I had when I was younger. And like I said, now I have something to say. Now I have a lot of things to say, and it feels good,
Yeah.
When I turned 40.
And you've been very busy.
Yeah. I'm 46. When I turned 40, I was like, this one day I'm going to make a movie. When is that going to be? If I don't start today, when is that going to be? So I turned 40. I started writing screenplays. I've written a couple now. I haven't done anything with those. They're like maybe one day. I'm not sure. Now I'm on to another one that's sort of been paused because I've been working on this Christmas tree book, the children's book I was talking about earlier. And I don't know. I feel like maybe we can talk a little bit about creativity because I know that's like, what your whole business is about. And something that I find so fascinating about it, that I know many people talk about creativity as like, it's coming through you, right? It's not something that I'm making up. It's something that I'm catching. I'm asking a question in my awareness, and then the answer comes and I write it down, which to me is really magical in and of itself. But then I've had these experiences where I write a story and then it comes true in some way. And that to me is like wild and trippy and just crazy. And I don't know what it is. Is it like my subconscious? Is it, I don't know. I don't need to know, I guess. It's just like, it's fascinating to me.
Can you give us an example?
One example is when I was pregnant, my daughter's dad had this idea for this film that I thought was fabulous. And I said, I'll help you write that. So when I was pregnant with her, we wrote this screenplay together. It was a lot of me doing it and him giving feedback. And I was like, but like I physically typed it out. And so there was a lot of like my influence. I kind of took his story and sort of made it my own. And it ended up being different than he had originally envisioned, like quite different. And it was these two people and like a love story. And in the end, they ended up not being together. And in the way that they ended up not being together in this story was what happened with he and I. It wasn't like the details, the story was different, but the symbolic way that it happened was exactly the same. And that was like 6 years before that ever happened. So
wow,
that was weird. I remember looking back and be like, oh, like I wrote our story in the beginning.
Wow. When you were writing it, or like when you, closer to the time when you finished the screenplay, like, did you have any, because I've had premonitions too about ex-boyfriends. I didn't make it into a screenplay or anything, but it was like the story I told myself ended up coming true. And actually basically about a breakup, like almost exactly, which is so interesting. And now in hindsight, I was like, I knew it. I fucking knew it. I fucking knew it. But anyways, yeah. Was there any like women's intuition of like when you were writing it or putting it together, like kind of tying the two together of like, oh, I wonder if this is.
I don't know. Not that I remember.
Okay. So what's another example?
So the current script that I have been working on that I put on hold, when I started working on it, I took this class by this woman named Diane Bell, who I absolutely love. And she has a class called Write Your Screenplay in 8 Weeks. And for me, it's not been 8 weeks. It's been a couple years off and on, but it's really just, I'm taking her steps and learning from that. And one of the things that she has you do in the beginning is write down all the main characters, and then you kind of just describe their whole lives, like who they are, where did they come from, how old are they, what do they like to do, were they shy when they were kids, were they like the center of attention, were they this, were they that, just not that you're going to essentially use all of that information in the story, but it's so you can know these characters. And so I found that when I was doing that, the characters just were already, they just were themselves. And I would just ask, okay, who's this person? Where did they grow up? And they would just come, and it just became them on the page. And so the main character of this film is a guy who is very naive in some ways, very innocent and optimistic, and has this history, this thing that happened to him in college where he ended up having a panic attack. And because of that happening, he's now later in life terrified of that happening again. And so, of course, in the story, what has to happen is that has to happen, and he has to face his biggest fear so he can overcome it. And when I wrote that, I had never had panic attacks. I didn't know, there's a lot of the essence of this character that was me, and I recognized that, the innocence and this like need to have this, I don't know how to describe it, but like for me, I need to know that everything's going to be okay. I need to know that good things are happening, that good things come out of bad things, that we're moving in a positive direction. Because if I don't know that in my soul, it will take me down. And so that's the same with this character. And I wrote the script. I'm probably about 3/4 of the way through. I got to a point where he has his panic attack and he has to face it. And I'm like writing it, and imagining what it would be like. I don't know. And then a couple months later, I don't know, I started having panic attacks from my own life situations that were different, that had nothing to do with this story, their script. But then I was like, what the hell? Did my unconscious somehow know that was going to happen? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. But all I can say is now that I've been through that, I can write this character way better. And it also changes the story, because coming out, how do you heal that? Well, how did I heal it? And what are the things that I am doing now to heal myself from that? Because that was not that long ago. That was last year and the beginning of this year. So that was another example of it just kind of coming true. Another little things here and there, but yeah.
I think that's really
the character of this journey that I am on myself. So
yeah,
I think it's pretty crazy and probably pretty normal.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I love the idea that our output is so much greater than what the actual thing is. You know what I mean? There's so much energy behind it, and so much magic and alchemy, right? I think about I'm obsessed with music, right? And there's this stupid 3-minute song that crushes me and makes me cry every time I hear it, or really brings me to this like incredible place, right? And it's not, it's like there's something in the song or a piece of art or a piece of writing and stuff that has this like, this magic to it or something, right? And something that I admire and appreciate about you, like in like, observing your journey since we've been friends, it's kind of like whatever life brings you, like you're playing along with it. You know what I mean? Like you kind of go along with it, right? And it's like maybe the medium needs to change because the set is different. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? Like you've done photography, like you've written your children's book, like Tiny Girl in the Egg. Like, I was like re-looking at your book, and it's like, it was just a bedtime story, right? That you were telling Lyra. Mm-hmm. And then you turned it into a book, and just like taking, I think too, like, what I get from that and like you sharing those things, like what comes to mind is like, sometimes it's like, we don't have to like drill our will or like, it has to be this thing, into existence. It's like, we can really like co-create with whatever you want to call it, right? Like the universe or whatever like life is bringing you. And I think like you, of all the creatives that I know, like are really very adept at this, and just kind of like, just like co-creating with the universe and stuff. And sometimes it's a screenplay, and sometimes it's photography, and sometimes it's, graphic design or whatever, but like, you're always like down to play. And I think that's really interesting. And maybe you should have a class of like, like write a screenplay about the life you want to lead because it's going to come true anyways. So be careful what you write about. Yeah. Can you write me a story of how I'm like wildly successful and like madly in love and like have many houses around the world? And I don't know what my big, strife thing is, but let's make it cute.
what shoes you're going to wear? That's the big thing you have to overcome.
Yes.
What outfit am I going to wear tomorrow?
Yeah. It'll be a really shitty movie. It'll be a super boring movie, but it'll be great for me. I've built enough character. I'm done. I'm ready for the happy ending story.
Well, it's interesting because the book the Christmas tree book that's coming out next year, there's a mom dies, and I was like, oh no, does that mean I'm going to die? I literally like was afraid of that, which I'm not afraid of that anymore.
Maybe you'll die, maybe like something that you don't need anymore, Well,
a part of me died through this whole panic attack.
This episode is brought to you by the Creator Jump Off community. You're a creative who's running a side hustle and you feel super overwhelmed and confused by everything you have to do. I have something real awesome for you. It's called the Creator Jump Off community, and it's built to help you feel organized, focused, and empowered so you can hit your business goals this year. This is not a get-rich-quick thing. It's legit business training, community, and coaching, all taken from my experience as a creative entrepreneur for over 15 years. Life is too short to make art that you hate. Come check out the Creator Jump Off community and see how you can kickstart a profitable side hustle starting today. Go to nataliemertz.com/creatorjumpoff to learn more.
Whatever you want to call it, panic disorder episode that I had this last year, definitely a big part of me died.
Do you care to share more about that? Like what was going on?
First, I want to just speak a little bit to what you had just said. Thank you for those compliments. That it's like just cool to hear somebody say that. I've never really thought of myself that way, and it's true. So thanks. I feel as though you're completely right that it's not about taking your will, like willing something. It's about uncovering what it is. Like a sculpture. You have a big piece of rock or marble, and you're uncovering the sculpture in it. It already exists. That character is already there. The story's already there. You're downloading it. You're asking, okay, what happens next? And then what happens next comes to you, and you write that down. And what happens next? Oh, this. And like, it's amazing to me when these ideas come to me, because I know they're not from me and they're so brilliant. Also, the same screenplay that I was talking about with the panic attacks, there's things that happen in the beginning of the story that they just happened because as I was writing it, that was what was happening. And later on in the story, there's a reason why that happened that I didn't know when I was writing that. And I'm like, who knew that? Like somebody did. There's and to me, that's like the infinite intelligence. There's like that story exists, and it's just uncovering what it is together. So like, yeah, just to kind of elaborate on what you were saying, that's how I feel about that.
I want to get into like what has happened with you in the last year, but just to piggyback on what you just said, like, can you talk me through like, like a project or something and like that process? Like, what does that look like? You know what I mean? Like, I remember you sharing it, kind of like your process with me, like with one of the screenplay that you wrote like a couple years ago and stuff. But yeah, like, what does that look like to you? Like, does it like just spirit or whatever say like, I have like we're ready for a screenplay, you know what I mean? And like, or whatever, like, what is that? Yeah. Like, what does that process look to you when you're in a project?
Sure. I can give you a really good example of that, which is the Christmas tree story, which is an awesome way that it was born. I had a Christmas tree in 2018 that we put out on the side of the road when we were done at the end of the year. And I thought, I didn't really spend much time with this tree. Like, it just was like, somebody cut down a tree, we put it in our house, it was there, and then we threw it out. And I was like, that was a life. So I thought, next year I'm really going to spend time with the tree and honor its life and be grateful for it. So 2019 came around, and I was also listening to Eckhart Tolle a lot, which I still do now. At the time, I was listening to him too, and he talks a lot about beingness and just connecting your beingness with the beingness of others and with the beingness of nature. So I was doing that with our Christmas tree, just spending time with it, honoring its life, recognizing that it has a life, that it was taken so that we can have this decoration in our house. And I was just being with it. And I remember standing there, feeling the beingness inside of me, connecting to the beingness of the tree. And I thought, this feels like a really good thing. But how can this be good? How can essentially murdering something else for decoration for a month in my house, how can this be good? I just had that question, and then this answer came to me through the tree or through whatever, and it was the idea for the story. And I was like, that's a really good idea. And I saw it as an animated short film. In my mind, I was like, I have this, cool. So I jotted down a couple like sentences, and it just was like this magical hit. And then I didn't do anything with it because then 2020 came around, COVID. And then when I was home not working, I decided to do the tiny girl and the egg. So that was what was there for me. And then I set myself up with this structure of every Tuesday is working on time for me to work on my creative projects. So other days of the week I work for my clients. Tuesdays is for me. So I set that structure up for myself. So at the time I was working on that screenplay, showing up every Tuesday, working on the characters, working on the outline, working on, just the script. Then 2020 happened. I was like, okay, I knew this is the time I need to make the Tiny Girl and the Egg book. So I did that. Once that was done, I sat back down on my Tuesdays to start to pick up my screenplay again. And what was exciting to me and wanted to come through was this Christmas tree story that I remembered I had jotted down the year before. So I thought, okay, that's what's alive right now for me, and let me do that. So every Tuesday I showed up, and I thought, oh, it's a screenplay for this animated film. So I'm like, okay, exterior, blah, 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 starting the screenplay. And then I just start hearing this like voiceover. So I just started writing this like rhyming voiceover. But then it ended up just going and going and going and going. And then so it was this like rhyming book instead first. So I would just show up every Tuesday. Okay, what happens next? What happens next? I didn't know. I knew like overall kind of where the story would go, but I didn't know that there was a mouse character. I didn't know that there was a cat. I didn't know that there was this and that and this person and like this thing happened and like it just came, and it wasn't this magical feeling at the time. I was just like, okay, what happens now? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, what am I going to make for dinner? La, 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 whatever. I'm like, all right, writing it. After a month or two, however long it took me to do it, I then read through it all and I was like, oh, this is actually really good. And I probably made a few edits here and there, I imagine. And then I took it to Michael and I said, can I read this to you? And he said, yes. And I read it to him and he cried. And I was like, this is actually really good. Didn't feel like it was so amazing at the time as I was writing it. I was just showing up, doing the work. But in the end it was, and then I was like, holy crap, like this is a really good story. And now I know, like, okay, this is a book and fuck, I don't know how to I don't want to publish this myself. I don't want to I just did that. I don't want to market it. I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to illustrate it. How do I get a publisher? How do I get an illustrator? I have no idea. So then that whole thing started. And it was all just it felt for such a long time, it felt like I was just shooting in the dark. This is never going to happen. I have no idea. How is this possibly going to ever happen? Oh my God, it's just taking forever. That kind of thing. So that was the process for that. I can also speak to how I did find a publisher if you want. I don't know if you know that story. If you think that
I do want to hear that. I just want to, so I'm going to use the C word. It sounds like some of it or whatever was kind of channeled, would you say, per se? You showed up, you brought your body to the keyboard. Would you say that?
More, I would say I would use a different C word. I feel like it's more like a conversation. I feel like it's me saying, what happens next? And then I'm told.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you just trusted that. Yeah. You just trusted it.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Whatever came.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can always change it later if it's stupid, if it sucks. You can always go back and edit it. I just go with whatever comes first. Yeah. And then you can play around with it. Maybe it means something later. Maybe it doesn't.
Yeah. I love that. And I love there is something about just showing up, right? And just let it be easy. For me, something I've been thinking a lot about lately is I know I'm keenly aware of what my strengths and my weaknesses are in terms of my career and stuff and how I show up in my business. And I'm not good at operations shit at all. I've had to learn how to do it because I can't quite afford to. I hire assistants and stuff, but haven't been able to hire off a COO, and just be I want to do all these things. You make it happen and I'll just show up and whatever. And I get really bogged down by it. And I beat myself up so much about it. And, when you were just talking now and sharing this process of okay, what comes next? It's for me, it's doing this, podcasting or just talking to people or coaching people or whatever, being in front of people or writing, doing something creative. And my mentors always say, just lean into your strengths. If you can hire out or, you know what I mean? How can you kind of minimalize the things that you're not good at or delegate, eliminate, use software, try to get it off your plate as much as humanly possible. It's something about just showing up. Right. And I think with creatives, we can build all this mountains of I got to do this first, right? And I need to clean my studio or I need to go back to school to learn how to do the skill better, whatever. And maybe there's a time and a place for that, right? But I think a lot of it though is excuses or just, you know what I mean? Just us making things so much more complicated. And I really appreciate that. And when I was working on my Oracle deck, I had time blocked to write or time blocked to illustrate. And Leigh, I always tell people it was the most fun I've ever had alone in my office. Cause it was like you said, I was communicating. I was communicating with the artists that I was drawing or writing about or whatever. And it was for me too, similar to you, it's just it was communicating because it wasn't just what Natalie wants to say. It was what needs to, it's Oracle cards. So it's kind of woo woo, what does the card want to say? What does Shaka Khan want to say? And it made it magical. And to me, when you were talking, let it be easy came up. right? Like that's the thing, is like the magic of art is it can just be a conversation, and it can just be easy, and just like showing up, just like bringing the body. And then, yeah, like you can go back and tweak and refine and whatever, you know what I mean? That's not to say there isn't an editing process, and there's a refinement process after that. But yeah, I really love that.
I was going to say, one of the things that I've learned too, can be hard to not try to edit yourself as you're going. But one of the things I learned from this screenplay teacher is you just want to like write the shittiest version first. You just get it down. You're just like puking it all up onto the page. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be like the worst, cheesiest, most like trite story ever. And then later you go back and you throw shit out, you put other things in, that's the sculpting process, right? So that's where I have struggled too. I want it to be perfect the first time, but just if I can't think of the right words, I just put something there and I just try to move on and move on and move on and move on. Just keep going, just get it out. And yeah, you were saying like, let it be easy. I think showing up is not easy. That's the hard part. Showing up is hard. And for me, I think it just came down to like, well, time's running out of my life. So if I'm not doing this now, when am I going to do it? So having that like little fear of regret. I don't want to be on my deathbed. I never went for my dreams,
Yep. And, fear is a great motivator.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. Talk a little bit about how you got a publisher.
Okay. So I basically would just read my story to anybody who would listen. I started off, I love reading it to people. And I would just find my friends and family and say, I wrote the story. Can I read it to you? And they'd be like, yeah, sure. And most people, I would say probably like 80% cried from the story. And everybody loved it. And some of the people would say, I know so-and-so who's somehow involved in something to do with publishing. Why don't I connect you with them? And so I just followed like every single little lead that somebody brought to me. And I did my own research online. I Googled it. I knew somebody who was a children's book illustrator. I reached out to him. I joined has a really long name, SW something, something, something. It's like Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, something like that. I forget. I joined that, which was not anything against them. It just wasn't helpful for me. The first thing I did that I saw when I went onto they had like a message board, was like, don't write rhyming books. If you write a rhyming book, it has to rhyme exactly. You have to have bat rhyme with cat. You can't have something that sort of rhymes. I'm like, I have a lot of sort of rhymes. What's wrong with that? Like, okay. So I just was like, meh, leave
Good.
that, filter out my information. And so I met with a woman who was a successful children's book writer. Her whole life she was retired. I met with her. I read her the story. She gave me advice. I did a Zoom with this other woman who had something to do with the industry. Anybody I possibly could, I shared it with and talked to, and got a lot of discouragement. Things weren't going anywhere. I read a lot of articles, how to find a publisher. You have to, first of all, find somebody who takes unsolicited material, which is not very many people. And then once you find those people, you have to find somebody that you think would be a good match for you. So you're just kind of sorting through and sending your story out and not hearing anything back. So that happened for a while. And then one day my friend Nicole, who I had read the story to, called me, texted me something. She said that she had been at this event and she met this woman who was involved somehow in children's book publishing. So she's like, oh, you have to hear my friend's story. And so that woman was at this event with her friend. This friend, her name is Dana. She founded a nonprofit organization that goes into schools and does programs around grief and loss, because she lost her son at a young age and found at that time there wasn't a lot of support for friends and people in the school and that community. So she founded an organization dedicated to him. And so she was like, oh, you should hear this story because there's an element of grief and loss in this story. So she ended up hooking me up with this Dana woman. We had lunch together. I read her the story. She cried and she said, Leigh, I am going to do anything I possibly can do to help you get this book published because I want it. And I want to use it in my groups with my kids. There's so many lessons that we can do throughout. We could break this book up into, chapters and do this lesson about friendship and this lesson about hope and this lesson about, whatever else. And so she went home and she sent me an email of all the books that she uses in her groups, in her therapy groups, and the publishers that publish those books. So what I found was once I had that focus for the story, because before that I was like, it's a wonderful story for anybody and everybody, and it's a holiday story and it's lyrical and wonderful. Once I had the focus of this is a story about grief and loss, and it can be used specifically for these people, which is most people anyway, right? Who hasn't experienced some sort of loss and grief in their lives. But it can specifically be used for these kids, these families, these adults in these groups. And this is why, and this is how it can help them. And so once I had that focus, I was able to write a very compelling email cover letter. I sent it to one of the publishers that she told me about that she uses in her groups. And they wrote me back, and they were the ones.
And the rest is history. And it's going to be
magical way of happening.
And it's going to be released next Christmas. Yeah.
2024.
Amazing. Yay. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to read it. I want to read it.
I haven't read it to you?
No.
Oh, we'll do that later.
Leigh? I thought we were friends.
We'll do that another time.
Before we move on, I want to underline some things that you said that I think is really helpful and important, for people to hear is first thing you said was, after I asked you, how did you get published? The first thing you said, you talked to everybody and their mother that you knew. I think this is super important. And this is something that I talk about with my coaching clients is your first audience is the people that you know. And it's so important to just say it out loud to everybody. You know what I mean? And in a way, it's more for you than it is to let them know what's going on. But it's so good to share for me, it was pivoting to a coach from being a graphic designer and just saying it everywhere I went, even when I was embarrassed and I was nervous and whatever. I was just I'm a business coach for creatives, right? I am no longer Natalie, the designer or whatever, telling everybody. And to bring it back to spirituality, woo-woo, energy stuff, I think it's very definitive signals to the universe that you're focused on this, right? Your energy is going towards this and stuff. Something I also encourage creatives to do too is especially with timing and stuff, to kind of go back to time blocking of tell people, when you're making a coffee date or you're making plans with people, say out loud, I am unavailable Tuesday mornings because I'm writing my screenplay, or, you know what I mean? Or I'm working on my Oracle cards or something. I really believe just saying stuff out loud is really powerful. So I love that you did that. You just everyone and their mother, you mentioned it, right? And also it's just connections, right? And then people came out of the woodwork and people that you know what I mean? And just asking everybody, do you know someone in the publishing world? I think is super awesome. And then you doing your due diligence, right? Looking, doing the research, finding out how does this game work? I also love that you ignored that thing about the rhyming. Fuck that. You know what I mean? There's room for everybody and everything. And I think it's really important to if you're really excited about this and you have something pretty freaking awesome, hold on to that. You know what I mean? Yes, of course, maybe there's tweaks and refinements or whatever, but like, just like, like I had people tell me that Music and She Oracle was like a horrible name and it would never sell or whatever. And not that I'm like wildly successful from it, but like there's people who like love it. You know what I mean? And that's all that matters. I get like texts from friends and like tags once in a blue moon on Instagram that people love it. So it's like, who gives a shit? Mm-hmm. So I love that. Doing your due diligence. And just keep going. Again, I think it's like showing up, right? And even though like, you get a lot of no's, another thing I want to underline that you said, no, getting no's is a part of the process. And it sucks and it hurts our, our ego and stuff. But like something I learned probably from my business coach, and she's big on sales, is like, she calls it collecting no's. You know what I mean? Like I'm in the process of just collecting no's, and the more that like I accept that this is just part of the process, I have to collect a lot of no's to get to one yes. It makes it a little less painful and a little less personal. Like this is just the game.
Yep.
So I just wanted to underline some of those things. So let's, kind of go back a little bit, if it's okay with you, like, the like behind the scenes, like the emotional journey that you went on, like writing this book and what happened. If you want to, you totally.
Well, I'm just thinking about what I want to say. There's something important I think I should share about once I got a publisher. It wasn't like, woo, everything's great, smooth sailing. It took a whole other year to, first we had to negotiate the contract. And I felt like very strongly, like I was very passionate about the story. I knew that it was very good, and I knew it needed to be in the world. And I also recognized that while I wrote it, I didn't write it. Like I said earlier, it's something that like I captured and helped. At this point, I feel like I'm a midwife for this story to come into the world. It's my baby, maybe I'm the mother and it's the baby, or, the midwife, whatever. And so once I had the publisher, it was very important to me that I didn't give up too much control of it. While I don't want to do it all myself, which is why I was getting help. I didn't want to do this whole thing by myself. I also didn't want to just give it all away. And so I negotiated that I had final say of the text and the title, which you don't always get, especially if it's a big publishing house. You don't get that at all. You sign it over and they do whatever they want. And I also negotiated so that I had say in who the illustrator was and what the illustrations were, but not final say. I could just have input on those, which was fine. And so once all of that negotiating happened, then it took even more months to actually then begin starting working on editing it. And the publisher had a lot of ideas that he wanted to change with the story. And which, some of that's okay. But, you're like, well, what do you want to change? Like, isn't it perfect the way that it is? Like, it's ready here. Print it, right? And so he took the story, I think because it happened over such a long period of time, I think that he had given the story to many different people in the publishing house, and they had edited it all like over such a long time that when we were finally ready to start working on it together, he sent me his version. It was not my story anymore. It was completely changed. It's been a year. We signed a contract. I'm like waiting for this to happen. What is this? Like, I'm not publishing this. It was like something that he wrote that was based off of an idea that I had. That basically was what he had sent to me. So I was like, what do I do? What do I do now? And so I had to face this fear of like, you know what? Maybe I have to start over. Like, maybe this isn't the right publisher for me. And maybe I have to start from scratch. And I had to be okay with that. And so I went through the whole story. I made all of these notes and I said, what happened to this part? What happened to this part? Why did you change this? Where did this go? And then I had to say like, all very nicely and professionally and say like, the ending, the way that you have it, that's not what the story is about at all. Like, there are thousands of stories about, it doesn't matter what's under the Christmas tree, it's the love that's there. That's not what that story is about at all, at all. And so I had to say, it's not about that. It's about this, 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 and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And so he got to a point where he was like, I think we've strayed really far from your original idea. So can you please send me the original? And I said, sure. So I did again, and we started from that place. And so then it became a whole other probably year now at this point. Yeah. And of him saying, I want to do this, I want to change this, and me having to like sit with that and think like, okay, the people pleaser in me wants to say yes to you because I want you to be happy. I want you to be happy with me. I want you to be happy working with me. I want this to go smoothly. I don't want conflict. However, if your idea is not good, or if I don't feel in my gut that it's right for this story, I had to learn to say no. And I had to learn to stick up for what I thought was right and explain why. And luckily, he was fine. Anytime I felt strongly about something, he would say, okay, moving on. A couple things I really had to fight for, but, and then there were other things that he would suggest that I was like, that's fine. I don't care. It really doesn't make a difference to the story. If you feel strongly about that, cool. That's good. Like, I really don't care. So it was like a give and take. And I really did end up feeling like I was this like midwife, like steering the ship, like, how does this feel in my gut? How does this feel in my gut? And like, yes, no, maybe, So yeah, and then that was a really big growing lesson for me, learning to like how to stand up for myself in that way, because I would send these emails and say, no, no, and this is why. And then I would feel so like nervous and like bad. My friend calls it the vulnerability hangover. Like the next day you're like, I did something uncomfortable, and is that okay? Am I okay? Is he going to get mad? And it always was fine. It was always fine. And it worked out. The emotional journey that you want me to talk about is that like panic attack stuff?
Yeah. If you want to share that,
I don't know how much time we have. That's kind of a longer story, but I'm happy to share any of it. I'm an open book when it comes to this stuff. So
it's up to you. I'm like trying to remember where we kind of left off with your story. But I do think too, just like how we humans, like navigate life stuff, you know what I mean? And like trauma and grief, and like keep moving forward. Or sometimes we just have to take a rest, like sometimes life is like, or whatever is going on is like, it's demanding our attention, and everything has to be on pause and stuff like that.
I will say, like, I'm having this deep realization right now. Like we said earlier, like a part of me did die, and it did. And that's like the mom dying in the story. And I've thought of this before, but I haven't quite really put it together so clearly. So the last year I went through a lot of stress that ended up in me having panic attacks. And I was not sleeping at night. I was panicking all night long. I went to doctors. I went to psychiatrists. I have a therapist that I see anyway. I was able to kind of move through that. Then it came back again and in full force. And I didn't sleep very well, really much at all for a month, and was panicking and just going downhill to this deep, dark place where I was having these terrible, dark thoughts, so much anxiety and panic. My nervous system could not regulate. So in the end, I couldn't sleep and I couldn't function. So all day I was having these rolling panic attacks, like labor pains, like contractions, but it was panic, rolls of panic. And my experience of that was that there was no safe place for me to go. My body wasn't safe. My mind wasn't safe. My heart wasn't safe. There was nowhere for me to be that felt safe. So where could I go? Where could I go when myself was gone. I felt like I used to always really look forward to being in my heart and, being centered in myself, and always felt safe there. And suddenly I didn't. And it was as though I died. I lost myself. I had nowhere to go. The Leigh that I knew was gone. And it was replaced by this terrible, terrible anxiety and fear that I couldn't talk myself out of. I couldn't meditate out of. I couldn't yoga out of. I couldn't run out of. I couldn't sleep. And I ended up in the hospital, and I checked myself into an inpatient facility for mental health for 2 weeks and went on a whole long journey there. I had to end up going on medication. That was really hard for me to do because I was always very much a natural person. I thought meds are for other people. Meds are for people who don't do the work. Meds are for people who are lazy and just, don't go to therapy or whatever. I don't know. That was my prejudice, right? And it was very humbling. There was a man in the facility with me who was there the first few days. I was crying. I wasn't sleeping. I was just crying and panicking. Any medication they gave me, I would have panic attacks, and I would think it was the meds doing it. And he finally said to me, like, Leigh, I don't like medication either, but I'm taking it for right now. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to take it forever. And he's like, you need to take the medication and you need to be okay with taking it, because for you right now, it's life or death. And you need to take it. Take the meds, and it's not forever. And I said, you're right. And so I did. And luckily now I'm off of all of them except for one, which I'll probably be on for a while. I don't know. Who knows? I'm not really going there. But I died. Like, I feel as though I cried so much because I just had so much grief. And I feel like it was because I lost myself. And I remember saying to the psychiatrist, like, I just feel so much grief. I have so much grief. And so he thought I was depressed. And I was like, I'm not. Like, I wasn't depression. It was like, I don't know. It was just this loss of myself. And now that I've been through that, I feel comfortable and I feel excited about helping others go through grief and loss with this book, with this Christmas tree book, taking it to therapy groups, helping people know, like, my parents haven't died, my child hasn't died, my sister hasn't died, but I did. I feel like I did. I feel like I did. So there's an element of grief and loss that I understand. I don't understand everybody's. Obviously, everyone's is different, But yeah, just putting that together, like, I was afraid of dying, and I did in a certain way. Like, I did. And I feel reborn. I feel I have a zest for life now that I haven't had since I was a kid. And I feel so much more confident in myself. There were times when I wouldn't have been able to do this interview. I used to, like, go on to Zoom calls with people, and I'd be terrified for them to, like, call on me if it was a group. If I had to speak out in public, I would get all red and nervous and flushed and scared and embarrassed. And now I'm like, pick me. Like, I want to talk, I have things to say. I want to help. And so yeah, it's a big transformation. So there's a whole long story there too.
Well, I really appreciate that. And that is true. You, like, yeah, you messaged me. You're like, because I mentioned that I started interviewing people for the podcast, and you were like, I want to do it. I was like, I want you to do it. Let's make it up the calendar. I love that. And thank you for sharing that. Grief it's a thing. Like, yeah, in the past year, I've experienced a lot of it. Like, I had my aunt pass away, and my dad is still alive, but he had a stroke in April, and that has completely changed his whole life, and, like, the way that we communicate and the way that he can communicate with the world and everything, it's changed, and like, yeah. And there's grief in that too. And it's a wild journey. And someone once described me as oppressively optimistic. And I love that, actually, and not to be oppressively optimistic about grief. But I will say, like, there's so many gifts of it. I won't say, I don't think that there's the other side of grief, Like there's just like, like there's things permanently changed, right?
Yeah.
Like my aunt has passed, right? Like like things have changed with my father and this is like the new normal, right? But, like in a better place now, I can recognize like all these incredible gifts and a lot of it too is like so much more compassion and empathy and kind of peace within myself, right? And I think with grief, like there is something within us that dies, like there is something that is gone, like having to reckon with that, right? And I think it got me in touch with my mortality, you know what I mean? And like you said, like thinking about how I'm going to feel on my deathbed, I think about that a lot actually, and the older I get, and especially in the last year, like being around like my dad's in a nursing home, like being around a lot of elderly people in the past year. I think a lot about it, and it's like, I think it's good because it's like, even more now I'm doubling down on like, what makes me happy and what do I want to do? And what is my contribution here? And like you were saying, like you went through this dark night of the soul and a part of you died. And now like, you're back to yourself, right? And what do you want to do? You want to give back, right? Which I think is like, like is this incredible duty that our art has too, of like how do I pass on my empathy, my care, my experience? Like how can I share beauty or story or whatever connection with other people, like to help them through it too, which I think is super powerful.
Do you remember when you took pictures of me in like 2000?
Yeah.
12 or whatever. And I remember when we first were hanging out, I couldn't even look you in the eyes.
I remember you telling me that. I mean, I didn't really notice that.
Yeah. And when you took pictures of me, I was like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to feel confident. I was like such a different person back then, not in a good place of my life either. So
yeah, I was a very different person then too. Yeah, we went through some heavy duty shit. And I would advise people, get yourself a Leigh, like the beautiful thing that I love about our friendship and that I think is really unique from a lot of other relationships and friendships that I have is like, we talk a lot about spirituality. We talk a lot about like super deep stuff. I think we're both really big dreamers. And I love talking about manifestation. I love talking about, I don't know, just like things beyond the seeing world, right? Yeah. And like whenever we hang out, there's like so much like therapy on Instagram now and stuff like that and whatever. And I just think about like, I feel like I've seen like so many like posts about like, like how do you know if someone in your life is like good for you or not? Is like, do you feel drained afterwards or do you feel fulfilled? And like whenever we do get, we don't live that far away from each other, but we live, it's a schlep, and so it's like, not super duper often are we in the same place or even just a phone call, after we chat, I feel calm. I feel excited. I feel really, you know what I mean? Like I feel very grounded and I feel very, inspired, and I really like, yeah. So I think like it's so important to like, have your friends, your creative friends, your friends that like are a safe space to share like really big dreams. Cause there's certainly things that you and I talk about. I wouldn't tell everyone or I wouldn't tell damn near anyone. You know what I mean? And I think that's like super important. And I feel like we've had like a very supportive friendship too. Like I'm excited about what you do. You're excited about me. We've collaborated quite a bit. Like when you're talking about the book and the screenplays, it's like in my head, I'm like ready to be like, what can I do to support? What can I do to help? Which I really love. Like, so it's so good to have like, I don't know what the analogy is. I was going to say a running buddy, like, like someone who's like in it with you. And I feel too, like when we get together and we talk about projects and stuff, and especially in the beginning of our friendship, it was such like a strange whirlwind. I feel like how we met and when we hung out, like, I think we were both in very different places in life, but we were in a very big transition. And I was certainly in a very big transition. And it was like meeting you and meeting your ex, like, was so magical, right? and it was so, like, it was really like transformative and stuff. And it always like tickles me, like, we're still friends to this day. And like, and a big part of our friendship is, I think we're like little kids. You know what I mean? Like, we can talk about, we can be silly and we can talk about stupid shit together. We can talk about real deep life stuff. But the idea is like the doors are open, you know what I mean? And like, we can talk about our imagination and whatnot. And you know what I mean? Like, there's no, I don't know, like kind of like limitations, or like we have to talk about grown up shit. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
There's no boundaries.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In our conversations, I think we have good boundaries in life in general.
Yeah, definitely agree. I'm glad you feel that way after talking with me, because that's my goal in life, is to like let everyone feel, I want everyone to feel like free to be you and me. Did you ever have that when you were little? I had a little record player. It's like free to be you and me. And that was the title of it. It was all these like little songs about being yourself or something. I want everyone to feel accepted, completely accepted as who they are right now by me. And I want to see you shine. I want to see you happy. I want to see you fulfilled and excited and passionate and just like shining in your life. And if there's any way that I can help you, that makes me feel happy. I love talking with you. I feel like we like are on the same wavelength with things. We understand each other, and yeah, it's good. It's great.
Yeah. Everyone needs a Leigh.
Everyone needs a Natalie too.
Yeah. Well, on that lovey-dovey note, I adore you. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope that this is the first of many like podcasts that we do together. And yeah. And so why don't you tell the people like where they can find you, where they can DM you and tell you how much they've enjoyed this conversation.
They can find me on Instagram at Encourage Thought. And I'm also on Facebook, but not that much. My website is encouragethought.org. So those are the two best places to reach me.
Awesome. And then you have a book, you have a children's book out right now. It's called Tiny Girl and the Egg. And they can people purchase that from your website as well?
Yep.
Awesome. And then next year, so Christmas 2024 will be this amazing. I want to like get while you were talking about the book, I'm like, I want to get a real Christmas tree. I wasn't going to, but like, I like want to get a real Christmas tree now.
Yeah, let me know if you do. And I would love to read you the story sometime. And that book is called To Be a Christmas Tree.
Awesome.
So that I don't know where you'll find it. I'm sure on my website eventually, but lots of other places too.
Awesome. So, well, happy to share it and promote it. And maybe we'll have you on in a year and then you can promote it and let people know where to buy it.
That'd be great. Thank you,
awesome.
Natalie.
Thanks, Leigh. I love you.
I love you too. This is wonderful. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Hey there. Thank you so much for joining our podcast today. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would consider liking, subscribing, and even leaving us a comment. This way, it will help us to keep the podcast alive and continue to bring you some really awesome interviews and nuggets of creative wisdom. So thank you again for checking us out. I'll see you next time.